Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, brought to you by the great folks over at HSBC Rugby Sevens. My name is David Quadrelli. That is Harmon Dial, and we are back after a nice little Christmas break. Harmon, first of all, how was your Christmas?
It was great hanging out with my sister, hanging out with friends. It was good to just finally have some downtime. I was pretty tired after the road trip, so just to be able to hit the reset button, it was awesome. And now with hockey coming back, it feels like it's a perfect time because you're just excited and pumped to get going again, as opposed to years past. Again, it's sort of you hit the holiday break and you're enjoying the holidays, but then trying to switch back onto hockey, at least from covering the Canucks, is can be difficult because oftentimes they're sitting, I don't know, bottom third in the NHL standings, and there's a bunch of controversy and drama, and you're like, oh man, do we really got to do this again? But no, this year it's you're pumped, right? See them at the top of the standings, and excited to cover the game tonight and get back to the show.
The last time we did a show, the Canucks weren't first in the NHL standings, so we still technically have a game to break down. I know it feels like ages ago, and it feels like a long time since we've last done a show, but we'll get to that and much more. Today is a very packed episode of Canucks Conversation. We'll later be joined by Dave Hall, who's going to talk World Juniors with us. Sweden, which is the only team we're watching right now, 2 games into their tournament as well, 2 wins for Team Sweden with a shutout today against Germany. So we'll talk about that and more. Before we do that, I need to tell you about our presenting sponsor, who I already mentioned, HSBC World Rugby Sevens, Western Canada's largest sporting event, and this year is the 9th time the event has visited Vancouver as part of the World Rugby Sevens series. HSBC Vancouver Sevens, where high caliber rugby and the ultimate party weekend collide. SVNS truly is a sporting event like no other, and a weekend you won't want to miss. For 3 full days from February 23rd to 25th, BC Place is going to be the place to be. 12 women's and 12 men's sevens teams, including 2 Canadian squads, take to the pitch for 3 full days of jam-packed rugby and, of course, partying. Tickets on sale now at vansevens.com, starting from just $40 per day. Harmon, where the hell do we start? Like, where do we start here? Because we still have to talk about the San Jose game a little bit. Obviously, that was a 7-4 win for the Vancouver Canucks. Like I said, it feels like ages ago, but the vibes were good heading into the break. Andrei Kuzmenko scores 2 goals. I think we'll keep it short talking about that game, but I feel like that's kind of where we need to focus is Andrei Kuzmenko scoring 2 goals. He's back in the lineup tonight against the Philadelphia Flyers, and he's back on the first line with Elias Pettersson as well.
Yeah, and I mean, just a confidence booster to get that first goal within 2 minutes. I love the entry play by Pettersson as well, the way he was entering the zone so assertively and with that much speed, sort of backing up San Jose's defense. And then for Kuzmenko to pick up the loose change there, a score. And then most importantly, I think from his personal perspective and staying in the lineup, to score on the power play off that redirect, because the man advantage was really struggling for much of December, and it just didn't look right with 3 forwards and 2 defensemen. And I think this is a reminder that, hey, this Canucks power play really needs 4 forwards and 1 defenseman, and there aren't many great alternatives to Kuzmenko. So that alone, I think, should keep him in the lineup. At this point,
Yeah.
even just as a power play specialist, Kuzmenko deserves to be in the lineup regardless of how his 5-on-5 play is trending, because you saw it, right? He gives you extra options there with his sort of ability to redirect pucks in the slot. He also does well in and around the net, as we saw during many stretches last season. They just need to make sure that they don't have him hanging out too much on that left flank where Miller's been really successful. And I think you can make that power play work again, which I think is going to be a massive part of having this team sort of find its groove again. But really, that's my main takeaway is not even so much Kuzmenko focus specifically, but just the power play really needs him. And that alone should be a reason to keep him in the lineup moving forward. And it kind of sucks, right? You score 2 goals from Kuzmenko's perspective, and when you're starting to feel that confidence again, you just want to keep playing as much as possible. The break here is a bit suboptimal from that perspective, where they're going to play Thursday tonight against Philly, and then they're not going to play again until Jan 2nd against Ottawa. So it's a bit of a start and stop. And from that perspective, I'm going to be watching Kuzmenko carefully to see, okay, how does he get himself back to feeling the way he was offensively against San Jose? Does he feel that same sense of confidence, or is it truly another sort of fresh start again? But yeah, I think to me, he's cemented himself now as, regardless of how much he struggles defensively or what happens at 5-on-5, he's got to be in the lineup.
Yeah, and I was just reading back because yesterday I did something of the top 15 most read articles at Canucks Army of 2023, and I kind of took a bit of a trip down memory lane. And one thing I found on that trip was that, like, to start last season, and technically it wasn't 2023 that this was written, but the Mikheyev, Pettersson, Kuzmenko trio was legitimately one of the best lines in the NHL. And one of the things that I found interesting about that line was that a lot of the matchups were still going to Bo Horvat, not so much to JT Miller. If you recall, JT Miller was kind of playing with, what basically are third line wingers, and JT Miller was kind of on the third line, a bit under Bruce Boudreau there. But the Mikheyev, Pettersson, Kuzmenko trio was so good when Bo Horvat was still here. And I know they didn't have the same defensive responsibilities that the line would have now, but you talk about how it's just important he's in the lineup. It would be great if he could stick in the top six and stay on that line and find some of that magic that they had in the early parts of last year when they were able to find so much success. And you hope that it's close to possible, because Elias Pettersson's line isn't getting hard matched right now most nights. It's JT Miller's line taking most of the matchups. So I just found that interesting that, looking back, like, that line was so dominant at 5-on-5. And you just hope that they can find that spark again with Kuzmenko there.
Yeah, definitely. And really, it's interesting too, because in that San Jose game, it felt like they were involved in all the scoring, both for and against, because they were also on the ice for 3 goals against, right? And I think that's going to be the main thing that I look for in terms of whether that line can stay together, is how are they going to hold up defensively? Because I know that they can create offense, I know that they can create chances, but how are they going to fare in terms of winning their matchups? Are they going to be responsible in their own end? Now, it is important, I think, to mention that 2 of those 3 goals against in that San Jose game for that line started with mistakes, I think, by Pettersson. For instance, the Duclair goal, both Kuzmenko and Mikheyev were deep in the offensive zone below the hash marks. And at that point, as the loose puck started to become free for San Jose, Pettersson started the play actually above Duclair, but then he jumped in because he thought he could steal that puck, missed, and all of a sudden that's why there was a 3-on-2 and Duclair had all that time and space, because really Pettersson started above Duclair on that. So I looked at Pettersson as the sort of breakdown there, and also on one of the other goals against, Pettersson had a chance to clear, couldn't get it out. So that obviously will iron itself out. We know how good Pettersson is as a two-way player, but really that's another aspect of what I'm looking for, and I'm sure the coaching staff is going to be intently looking at, is how's that line going to fare in terms of what it gives up. And it's not so much just what happens in the defensive zone. Really, I think for that line, it starts with, when you're talking about controlling play, how successfully are they able to forecheck? And that's been the main point of emphasis that Tocchet hasn't liked about Kuzmenko's game. And while Mikheyev offensively has looked terrific, he's generated a ton of chances from the middle, scored a lot of 5-on-5 goals. Compared to when he's at his best, I think we still haven't seen him sort of be that menace on the forecheck that he's typically been when he was on the Toronto Maple Leafs. And obviously, I think the main reason for that is he's still recovering and putting that ACL injury further and further behind him. But when Mikheyev's at his best, he can be a monster on the forecheck. I remember watching so many Leafs games where Mikheyev was just such a thorn in the side of the other team's defenseman, and I don't think we've seen enough of that. So when I look at that line's forechecking success as well, and how they're going to perform in that capacity, yeah, I'm looking at Kuzmenko, and that's going to be huge. But I'm also hoping that further down the line that Mikheyev can have a little bit more jump and can add from a play driving element there too.
Okay, Philadelphia is in town tonight. What are you looking for from this matchup? And also, I just want to say, this is why we make such a great team, because that game was like 7 days ago, and you're bringing up defensive breakdowns and who was at fault. Dude, I could remember one of those goals. Like, one of the goals from the game is all I can remember. Everything else is a complete blur. I'm shocked you were able to recall that.
Ago. Yeah,
I know, it was good. It was good.
Impressive,
It was
You got a good memory there.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that was
don't have a
awesome.
good memory. I just rewatched the highlights again today.
We probably should have done that, Quads. We probably should
Yeah,
have done
probably should have done some prep, Grady and I, but
that.
Grady's got a puppy and you know how I am. So anyways, the Philadelphia Flyers are in town tonight. Harm, what are we looking for from this matchup where the two backup goaltenders will face off with Casey DeSmith getting the start for the Vancouver Canucks and Simon Ersson getting the start for the Philadelphia Flyers?
Yeah, I honestly think it's a great opponent for the Canucks to have after a few days off and riding the high of, okay, we're at the top of the NHL standings, because Philly's going to give you nothing easy. The way they play under John Tortorella, the level of buy-in that they have, they're the definition of greater than the sum of their parts, because you look up and down the roster and you think that team probably shouldn't be that good, and yet they're third in the Metro, I believe. They're firmly in a playoff spot right now, and it hasn't been a fluke. You look at their underlying numbers, and at 5-on-5, they're one of the stingiest defensive teams in the NHL in terms of protecting the middle of the ice, barely giving up high danger chances. This isn't a case of, okay, they've got a great goaltender and they're getting timely scoring and they're winning games by the skin of their teeth. They've genuinely been earning these victories, and it's because they pressure the puck so well all over the ice. And so once you come off that holiday break, I just think it's great to have an opponent where you know you can't coast by, to have an opponent where it's like, yeah, we can beat them, but we're gonna have to be on top of our details. We're gonna have to win board battles. We're gonna have to be quick and strong on the forecheck. We have to make sure that when we're breaking the puck out, that we aren't making mental mistakes, that we aren't getting too cute as we're transitioning play up the ice. And I think that's just a great way to get back into games, because as you'll see last night, for instance, as teams were sort of coming back after a few days off, teams can be sloppy when they first return. It can take time to get mentally switched on again. And I think Philly's just the type of opponent where you're going to have to be on right away, especially because, as we know, the Philly game early in the season was one of Vancouver's only ugly performances of the year. So the Canucks, you'd assume, aren't going to be complacent about this one either.
The thing that's so funny, and it's good that you brought up how hardworking the Flyers are, because that's what I kind of focus on. Was to start the year, we saw them come out so hot, and I just thought it was another case of, this is a John Tortorella coach team. We see this every year. We see it every year. A group of guys that shouldn't be as good as they are to start the year come out flying. They're playing the system, and then at like game 15, they're all super tired and can't keep it up over the full course of a season. But we're heading into January here, and the Flyers are still a very good, very hardworking team. So maybe this is the year that the John Tortorella coach team, that doesn't look like they should be any good, turns out to actually be good. I don't know, man. I found it interesting, and it reminded me of the Washington Capitals, who I was going to bring it up. Maybe we'll bring it up later, but Ethan Bear officially signs with them today, and we'll see kind of where that goes, where he ends up slotting in Washington. But like, all of Washington's underlying numbers look horrible, and they're right there in the playoff conversation in a very busy metropolitan division. And excuse me, holding down the wild card. And if you sort by points percentage, which of course we do on this show, they're third in the Metro. If you sort by points percentage, so it's just interesting that these two teams, who I don't think any of us would have thought would have even compete in the Metro, are really like right there in the playoff conversation.
And if you guys remember back to the Torts year with the Sedins, the Canucks had started off really well, but it was just after Christmas into the new year where their play really started to take a nosedive. And, that's when Torts was getting the Sedins to block shots and whatnot. And just going back to that Flyers game from earlier this season, that's where we got that banger of a quote from Talkett saying, "Who are we to think we're anybody?" So it's interesting to see kind of where the team has come now, and that the fact that the Flyers are still kind of hanging around in that division of theirs. But a good test tonight, and you got two backup goalies starting, so yeah, it's going to be an interesting matchup.
Okay, let's get to light the lamp right before we get to Dave Hall, and we'll give our first goal scorer of the game, because it is time now for Light the Lamp, brought to you by our friends at Four Winds Brewing. Vancouver is playing Philadelphia tonight, and we want to know who's going to score the first goal for Vancouver. If you nail it, you could win a $25 gift card to the Four Winds Tap Room located at 72nd and River Road in Delta. Enter by following us on social media. Keep an eye out for today's show clip and comment who you think will light the lamp and score the first goal tonight. Winners will be contacted directly. Check us out at Canucks Army, at Canucks Convo on Twitter, at CanucksArmy.com on Instagram, and Canucks Army on Facebook. And make sure you ask about Four Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store or have some delivered to your front door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. All right. This is going to be a good one. We'll get to Dave Hall here, who is brought to you by our friends at the VGH Millionaire Lottery. Lots of good stuff over there. Make sure you go support them. Order in person at London Drugs or online at millionairelottery.com. 19 plus to play. Know your limit. Play within it. Every ticket purchased supports VGH and the UBC Hospital Foundation. Don't forget to get your 50/50 plus tickets. All right, let's bring him in. Dave Hall is the man that we want to talk to right now because the World Juniors are on and we did our little World Juniors preview. Dave, this is back-to-back episodes of Canucks Convo for you. You were on the last episode we did heading into the Christmas break. First of all, hope you and the family had a good Christmas, and thank you so much for doing this again today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, it's been a busy couple days, but I'm ready to get back at it. And if I can, I'm going to predict Connor Garland for the goal scorer today.
Oh, I forgot to even do that myself. Okay, I'm going Quinn Hughes. Harmon, who's your pick?
Okay.
I was going to pick Garland too. So
wow.
Me and Dave are both loading up on Garland here.
I love it. Okay, Dave, so last time we had you on, you were previewing Team Sweden, which is the only team any of us care about right now at the World Juniors. They've had 2 games. They have 2 wins, 5-0 win over Germany today. Let's focus on the Canucks prospects. When you were previewing what you expected to see from them, how close is that to what you've seen from them against 2 opponents who are probably the weakest opponents they'll face from here on out? Is it safe to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Their tournament kind of starts tomorrow, obviously. Team Canada and Team Finland for the next 2. But not to give myself too much of a pat on the back here, but so far I'm pretty content with how I predicted. John Lekaramaki, we were hoping for a big tournament, and so far 3 points through 2 games, although he could have 10 to be realistic. That line has just been buzzing for both games. Tom Wielander, we all we were hoping for was just one of those tournaments where he kind of shows off his skating and is good defensive, but didn't stand out too much. So far, that's kind of what we've seen. And Elias Pettersson, I actually predicted last week that he'd kind of be the one that I thought would stand out as kind of the surprise for all Canucks fans. And so far, he's actually even shocked me, to be honest. He's been playing tons of minutes. He's led the team in ice time both games with 21 and 23 minutes. So he's just been a minute muncher. And yeah, so far, so good from all 3, to be honest.
Dave, I want to ask about Jonathan Lekaramaki because it isn't just the goals, but it seems when you hone in on his off-puck play, how he's been moving his feet, drawing penalties, engaged in 5-on-5 play, rather than just leaning on, let's say, just his shot and just his one-on-one skill. So like much more of a complete performance compared to last year's World Junior. What have you noticed in terms of what he's doing sort of away from the puck, even as a play driver? What stood out outside of just the goal scoring?
Well, and that's just it, right? Like that's kind of what I've been harping on all season is that, even though he's not the most, he's obviously not, doesn't have the hugest frame, he's still doing what he can to make sure he's getting into all the forechecks. He's even gotten a couple of hits in this tournament. He's just overall being a bit of a puck hound, and he's just making sure that he's being responsible on both ends of the ice, to be quite honest. And today we actually saw quite a bit of plays where he set up Noah Östlund to get quite a few chances, to be honest, and they just weren't going in. So overall, he's been so much more than just a shooter. And what I've liked from him in these first 2 games is we're even seeing him drive this the slot a little bit. So he's getting into that middle of the ice, and he's definitely he's going for it offensively. So
I'm really curious about him because It feels like all the conversation around him has been, yeah, he's going to be a really good finishing winger or a power play. No, I don't use the word power play merchant, but like a guy who's really effective on the power play, maybe not so much at 5-on-5. And I think everything we saw in his draft plus 1 year kind of supported that. And he's been doing better things as we've heard in our conversations with you. But I really noticed him today against Germany, just how good he's been kind of off the puck. And so I think he's an interesting player to kind of watch moving forward. Quickly, I wanted to get this one in because this is from a listener of the show, Nick P, in the chat here. Said, did you guys see the video of DP, Elias Pettersson, guessing the Sedins as the brothers who played for Sweden at the World Juniors in 1981? Dave, did you see that? Because that had me howling.
I hate to say it, but I actually didn't. I just saw it. I just saw a tweet of that today, so I'm going to go check that out as soon as we're done.
You need to go check it out. And we had an article about it on Canucks Army, so you can find it close to home. It was so good. It was listeners of the podcast. If you haven't seen it, go find it. It's so funny. Okay, which segues me into my question, which is actually about Elias Pettersson and what we've seen from him in this tournament. I feel like I've heard his name a few times. Did I see him correctly? Did I see him playing on a pair with Willander today?
So he was elevated to the top pairing today. I kind of mentioned in my opening tweet with the lines, they're kind of doing a good job at spreading out the lines. So they've tried a few things, especially in a game where you're winning 5-0 and you kind of want to give some options to try. But he was playing mostly with Haviland on the top line there, and I think they saw a couple shifts, but they weren't actually lining up together as a full unit. But
how did Pettersson do? How's Pettersson look so far through 2 games?
Yeah, he's exactly as advertised. He's not going to show up anything off, he's not going to blow you out of the water or anything offensively, but he's just a sound, solid, no nonsense kind of defender. He's aggressive. He's just playing big minutes and just doing everything he can to shut down the offense. So far it's been pretty flawless. Of course, as you mentioned, Latvia and Germany, we'll see what happens against Canada and the Finns, but so far he's just been pretty much as advertised as that two-way, just no nonsense defender.
What's been the story of his season so far? Because last season he spent the majority of it in the SHL. This year he hasn't been able to stick there, which, to be fair, isn't the end of the world, because the SHL is a really tough league for defensemen to earn trust to play everyday minutes. So he's sort of been playing in the Allsvenskan. What do you think the story of his season has been so far? And from a Canucks perspective, in terms of what's next, would you look at potentially for next season, look to sign him, bring him over to North America, or do you think it's best for him to continue letting him cook in Sweden?
Yeah, and I mean, it's important, he's 19, so I don't care if you're a forward or a defender. It's hard to crack minutes in the SHL as a 19-year-old. So I wasn't too surprised that he wasn't seeing a ton of minutes, but I was quite happy with the decision, because I'd much rather him play 19 minutes down in the Allsvenskan and get some good development rather than, struggle to play 5 seconds in the SHL. So far it's been a good showing. He's kind of quieted down a little bit. But his outlets are just fantastic, to be honest. From his transition from behind the net to get the puck to the forwards is just that's been what stood out to me as the most impressive in his game, because I kind of knew the two-way defense was always there. So the transition for me has been my greatest positive for him so far. And in terms of looking forward, it's a little tough. I wouldn't mind seeing him, see what he can do in the SHL. But with that said, I'm always a proponent to getting them over to play on the smaller ice in North America earlier than possible. So if that's an option and that's something they're thinking about, I'm all for them bringing him to Abbotsford and seeing what he can do over there. I think that's probably what we all kind of are hoping for. But at the end of the day, if he decides to stick over one more year, I hope it's in the SHL. But
I love it. Okay, Dave, when you were previewing, correct me if I'm wrong, you said USA and Sweden were kind of the 2 favorites to take home the gold this year, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
So 2 games into it. I heard this on the broadcast today. Sweden has 1 gold medal in the last 40 years and 10 silvers in that time. For some reason, I thought they were way better than that. How much pressure is on them on home soil to take home the gold? And do you think they can do it 2 games in?
Yeah, tons of pressure. Like as you mentioned, they're on home soil. Not only that, they kind of prepared for this. They knew they were going to be on home soil, so they kind of brought that team to win. They weren't making any nonsense moves here. They're not trying anyone out. They're going for gold. And so far, it looks they appear to be ready for the task. Even in their preview games, they looked really good against USA, except for one period. So all in all, I think they definitely do have a shot. It's been kind of tough in the first 2 games because, as we've already mentioned a few times, you're not really playing too hard against Germany and Latvia. Although Germany surprised yesterday, so they made history for themselves yesterday. So it was I saw today as kind of one of those trap games for the Swedes, where Germany was coming in buzzing off their big win against the Finns yesterday, and Sweden was coming off an easy game against the Latvians. So it was an easy game for them to lose. And Germany took it to them for the first two periods. It was only 2-0, and it was a lot closer than it should have been, to be quite honest. So,
Dave, great stuff as always. I'm sure, I don't know how many more episodes you're going to be on within the next 2 weeks, but I'm sure we will chat again soon. Thanks for doing this, man.
yeah, see you guys tomorrow. See ya.
There he is.
Have a good day, guys.
Yeah, you as well, Dave. Dave Hall, who you can find all of his writings over at CanucksArmy.com. He's got game previews. He's got game recaps. Although, admittedly, Dave and I both had holiday brain, and we forgot to do a preview for the first game. So there was just no preview for the first game. And Dave and I had a good chuckle about that over text, because both of us were just, we were Christmased out. And it was not going to happen. So we've got previews. We've got recaps courtesy of our pal Dave there. Harman, any takeaways from that conversation? Because I think my big one is just how Lekaramäki's off the puck skills, and looking, and I know it's junior, I get it, but looking like he could be someone that actually drives his own line. I think you have to be excited about that if you're watching this from a Canucks perspective.
It's a massive positive, because the worry that I'd had almost watching him at points earlier last season was not worry, but just I was looking at him and going, man, he's got to grow a lot in terms of what he's doing outside of the finishing and the one-on-one skill to ever become the type of player that an NHL coach would trust, right? You're seeing how difficult it's been for the likes of Nils Höglander and Andrei Kuzmenko, both at times. Obviously, Höglander lately has been able to move up the lineup and gain a lot more trust, but those are two guys that in their respective leagues beforehand weren't necessarily looked at as defensive liabilities. Like, I remember watching Höglander in the SHL and I was like, okay, yeah, he's not necessarily great defensively, but you would watch him in the SHL and go, he's getting in on the forecheck, he's driving play. You never looked at him in one dimensional. And yet when it came to the NHL level, it was a challenge to get to the point where an NHL coach could trust you, right? And this is where it's been massive for me watching Lekaramäki get in on the forecheck, be a little bit more engaged physically, moving his feet, drawing penalties that way. That's imperative for him to become an NHL player. Again, it's sort of what you expected, given that he is now one of the older players in this tournament. He was expected to dominate, but this is what you want to see, because look, if he was racking up a ton of points just from unleashing bombs on the power play, and yet his play away from the pocket at 5-on-5 and just as a play driver as a whole was less than stellar, then you'd say, okay, there's potential here, but he still looks like a really long-term project, really raw. So definitely encouraging.
This one from Oznuk, and we're going to get to anyone else in a second, but the reason I bring this up is because I just found it just to be a little interesting one that I wish we asked Dave about, because I don't know the answer. But he said, is Finland falling off as a hockey powerhouse? I thought Sweden was a hockey powerhouse. A hockey powerhouse doesn't get one gold medal in 40 freaking years. I did not know that, Harman. Like, that was news to me that Sweden hadn't won a gold medal in 40 years. I hope our boys bring it home. We're all proud Swedes this year.
Yeah. And speaking of Finland, it's a good question. I haven't dug too deep into their roster, but I mean, it is going to be tough to, like, remember, I think it was the 2016 World Juniors where like they had just such a stacked roster. And
Brad Lambert.
Yeah.
Was he there?
No,
he wasn't there. He wasn't there at that time.
No.
Sorry. He was like 12 years old.
Yeah, but like you look at some of the current Finnish stars in the NHL, I mean, like Barkov, Rantanen. I know Laine's had a slow start, but Laine, when he's at his best, Sebastian Aho, you're right. Like you are sort of wondering, like, when's that next wave of Finnish talent going to come? But at the same time, Rantanen, Aho, Laine, like, these guys are still in their 20s. It's not like they're aging out and you're wondering that you're worried about there being such a shortage of Finnish talent. But yeah, I mean, it is something to keep an eye on, but it's also sort of like these things happen in ebbs and flows where one year you'll just have a stacked roster sometimes. I mean, think about the 2019 U.S. national team. And the amount of talent they had with like Jack Hughes, Trevor Zegras, Cole Caulfield, Matt Boldy, that 2019 draft was just stacked with American talent. So all it takes is one crop, 1 year of good young players for a country to, for that generation be back on the map.
Yeah, and look, I'll be honest, like Finland produces some really good goaltenders, and I think that's going to be kind of the next wave because I really believe in a lot of the goaltenders that you're seeing come out of Finland. But they play Latvia tomorrow, and I don't want to answer Osnak's question about if they've fallen off as a powerhouse until tomorrow. If they lose to Latvia, yeah, they're not a powerhouse anymore. Sorry, that's just I don't make the rules. That's how it is. I know you gave a really well thought answer, but that's how I'm going to go with it. That's my vibe check on Finnish hockey right now. Anyways, let's get to anyone else, presented by our friends at DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat, and it's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. That's right, for a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. That's all capital letters, NATION, and the numbers 25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms do apply. All right, we've got a lot in here. And Harm, I told you before the show, I didn't want to talk about it, but I said if one person brings it up, we have to talk about it because people want our take. People want to hear our take on this matter. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. I don't even want to call it a report. The video that was posted to social media from a podcast, I think it was Spit and Chicklets, about Elias Pettersson wanting to team up with Connor Bedard in Chicago. This one from Andrew Christensen. How many picks do we get when Chicago signs Petey? Like, let's just think about this for a second, okay? Because, first of all, why on earth would he ever want to go to Chicago of all teams? All we've heard during his whole time in Vancouver is, I want to play for a winning team. I want to play for a winning team. Why would he sign with a team that's 5 years back of where the Canucks are right now? Like, that would be like if Chicago was a powerhouse right now, and Elias Pettersson is who he is right now, and he's with Chicago, but he's like, you know what? I really like those Vancouver Canucks. I really like that they just signed Michael Del Zotto and Sam Gagner to be veteran leaders to bring in the next wave of young talent like the Tyler Maddens of the world, like the Adam Gaudettes, all that young talent that they're booming with. And look, they've got that guy Brock Besser who's going to be great. I want to go play with him. Like, that's how I can put this best is it's basically like joining where the Canucks were before anything started going right in Vancouver. Like before anything went right in Vancouver. That's what it would be like for Pettersson to want to go to Chicago. I don't buy it for a second. I just wanted to get my take out there. I don't know why he would want to go there. I don't think it's true, first of all, but I think it's crazy. It's crazy to me.
Great idea.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. I mean, Pettersson has guys here that he's grown up with since he's joined this organization. They're finally at the top of the league. And I think, there's a connection to William Nylander because they've played together in some world championships that they're going to, chase the bag and go to Chicago. I don't see those guys as those types of players that would just go do that. Like, this isn't the NBA where superstars are, linking up and deciding we want to go play here. Both of those guys want to win. They're both in the prime of their careers. And yeah, there's been some speculation that Toronto might not be able to afford Nylander, but I don't think they're just going to let him walk away for nothing. And, of all places, like if the Canucks are going to orchestrate a trade with the Blackhawks, like Petey's an RFA, he's not going to just demand to go to Chicago. Like he doesn't have really that leverage to do so. So it's just, to me, it's just made up for clicks to get engagement. And look at the fan base that, that they've targeted here and the reaction it's caused. And I see people quote tweeting it online and they're kind of just feeding into it and getting, this rabid fan base that we're all, entrenched inside of, all worked up. So, and it's not, we should point out, like, it's not the actual Chicklets guys. It was posted on their account. It's like a sub show of theirs. So it's kind of like a game preview betting show. Yeah, they're a former NHL player that, they put that out there. But to me, it sounds like, oh, well, I heard this from so-and-so who heard this from so-and-so. They're just kind of loosely throwing it out on there when it has no credence whatsoever. So I just don't see how it makes any logical sense.
Harmon, your thoughts?
I don't just want to keep echoing what you guys said. I think you guys put it just fine.
The guy who reported it just didn't even sound like
no, exactly. Like
what he was saying.
That's my point. Like he's like wasn't even sure of himself or the report. Like if you're gonna put it out there, get a couple different sources that you've heard this from, not just my buddy heard so and so who knows so and so type of reporting. It's lazy.
And look, I know it's kind of against the rules to like try and discredit people's reporting. So that's not what I'm trying to do. All I'm going to say is I have a couple sources that I can talk to as well, and all of them are kind of saying the exact same thing that we are. So I don't want to spend much more time on this. At worst, what I view this as is, look, Shohei Ohtani is represented by CAA, same people as Pedersen, even though totally different people, same company. They also represent like Harry Styles and all these other stars. So do with that what you will. But at worst, I think we're going to see an offer sheet or a fake offer sheet, report of an offer sheet from Chicago, just how the Toronto Blue Jays got used in the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes. You got to imagine that's on the CAA registry. They're going through it as a company, like, hey, look what we did with Shohei Ohtani and how we got him 700 schmil. Let's try and do that with all of our clients. So this is at worst, that's what this is. I don't even want to spend any more time for this. And someone in the chat also brought it up that if they wanted Pedersen, like Chicago doesn't have the pieces to give it up because the Canucks aren't taking back a bunch of first round picks for Pedersen, right? Like they want to win now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So unless you're giving up Connor Bedard and like, if you're giving up Connor Bedard, maybe the Canucks will listen. But this is so stupid. I don't
trading
even know.
Trading Pedersen or trading Demko or Hughes is the sign of the white towels being thrown in. They can't win with this group, which a lot of fans wanted the last few years. But look at them now. Top, second best team in the league, or right up there, or depending on how you want to look at it with points percentage and points tonight and games in hand and all of that. I just don't get why Chicago of all places. What? Because they have the cap space? Well, you still have to have a quality team to attract players to want to go there. Just because you have the cap space in hand doesn't mean that players are going to want to go there.
I want to pose a question to you, Harmon. If you were a player and you had to pick between you're a player who wants to win years down the line, would you rather play for the Arizona Coyotes or the Chicago Blackhawks right now with who they currently have? Would you rather be on the Arizona Coyotes or the Chicago Blackhawks?
Arizona is going to be competitive sooner, but if we're talking about winning a Stanley Cup at one point, if we're talking about winning a cup at some point in my career, I'd bet on Chicago just because they have a more stable ownership group, probably not going to get moved. And I know that they're going to spend. Plus, you got a legit superstar in Bedard, but it would take a lot of time. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't discount, though, the impact of playing with quality veterans like Jason Dickinson and Nick Polino.
Oh, my God. Okay, on that note... That's so good. Nick has put this in the chat. He said, Elias Pedersen and Harry Styles to join a One Direction reunion tour, confirmed by David Quadrelli. So you heard it here first, folks. Okay, let's move on.
Well, I was going to say, how'd you get Ohtani? You had somehow finagled Ohtani into this.
Of course, the baseball guy had to work it in, eh?
I had to slip in some Shohei Ohtani nonsense when I'm talking about Elias Pedersen. Jeremy Lee said, Coyotes if you want to retire, which is a great comment. And we got a lot of great comments. So let's move on from this bull crap and move on to some other stuff that we got from our listeners in the YouTube live chat. This one also from Nick P. Given how active Alvin has already been, what do you guys expect from the Canucks at the deadline? I'll go first, Harm. I was asked about this at a couple Christmas parties over the holidays, and I think it's a winger. Like, I don't think they're going to tinker with the defense. I think you have the goaltender. I had a dream last night that Patrick Alvin called an emergency press conference and I don't know why I just thought of bringing this up now. It just kind of came back to me as I was talking. I had a dream that Patrick Alvin had an emergency press conference because they were unhappy with Casey DeSmith and they wanted to get a third backup goalie because you can never have too many goalies in the playoffs was what the quote was. And they traded for Carter Hart. And like, I don't know what they gave up. It was like a half dream, but I just dreamt last night that the Canucks traded for Carter Hart, but also kept Casey DeSmith. And they just said, this is insurance in case Casey DeSmith doesn't work out in the playoffs. But back to the original question, I think it's a winger. Like I think they're going to go out and get a winger ahead of the deadline if they do anything.
The honest answer is that this management group has done, I think, an excellent job of generally keeping the leaks quiet and making sure that information doesn't get out. So as much as you and I can sort of speculate and try and talk to people and try and gauge an understanding of what the Canucks might do, ultimately, just look at the track record of the last couple of trade deadlines. Who thought the Canucks were going to make a swing for Filip Hronek? Nobody saw that coming.
Mm-hmm.
Even the deadline prior, the way they got out of that Hamonic contract, nobody really saw that coming. And then that leading to them flipping a pick for Travis Dermott. So the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, I definitely get the logic in that. Yes, this team could potentially use another winger. And honestly, a lot of the story could be dictated by how does Kuzmenko fare over the next couple of months? How confident do you feel that he's part of the solution down the stretch and going into the playoffs? But with all that in mind, this management group has done a great job, I think, of keeping their plans relatively quiet. And as a result, I don't think anybody on the outside really definitively knows what they're going to be looking to do.
This is an interesting one from Jeremy Lee. In the beginning of the season, the Red Wings and the Canucks were in a similar position with a strong young core. What is the main difference as to why the Canucks are so much more successful? I would say, like, there's a few comparisons to be had here, but I would say one factor is that the Canucks core has just done more losing. Like, the Canucks core came into this season being very, very tired of losing. And that's not taking anything away from Detroit's young core, but like I think Detroit's just at a different stage than where the Canucks are, kind of in their retool, rebuild, if you will. And I think I think the Red Wings are close to where the Canucks are going to be. Like I think the Red Wings will probably be where the Canucks are in maybe like a year or two. But I just think we're seeing the Red Wings in a spot that the Canucks have been for years. But the difference this year is one, competent roster building around the young core, and two, a young core that was very, very tired of losing.
I think goaltending's honestly the biggest difference because right now the Canucks have one of the best goalie tandems in the NHL between Demko and DeSmith. In fact, it is number one in the NHL according to Evolving Hockey's model. And Detroit just can't get saves, whether it's Husso, whether it's Alex Lyon, James Reimer. They have not been able to get saves at all. So that's a massive discrepancy right there. I also think that the Canucks have star talent that the Red Wings just don't. And look, I love Dylan Larkin, Alex DeBrincat's worked out well for them, but they don't. And Mo Sader's a great piece on the back end, but the Canucks have actual superstars. When you look at Quinn Hughes, when you look at Elias Pettersson, the way JT Miller has been playing, Brock Besser, look at where he is in the goal scoring race. The Red Wings don't have that upper echelon of elite talent right now. Right now, Detroit actually reminds me a little bit of last year's Seattle Kraken, where they have balanced four lines that can score. They have a decent blue line, but they don't have goaltending. They don't really quite have star talent yet. I think the Red Wings will get there, but yeah, they're between the goaltending and the star talent. I think there's a clear difference there.
And a funny wrinkle to all of that too is, of course, Detroit passed on Quinn Hughes in the draft to take Filip Zadina, and they also traded Hronek over to Vancouver last year after that Horvat trade. And yeah, I think you can hit it on the nail on the head there. Harm is the goaltending is the big one, but also too, like they're still waiting for Lucas Raymond and Michael Rasmussen and Joe Veleno to kind of take that next step in their development. And they haven't really proved, Raymond's still pretty young. I know he's still early in his career, but they're trying to hope those guys can take the next step, and kind of got a little aggressive. I think perhaps maybe too quick, although they had the cap space to do it, signing like Perron and Andrew Kopp. They brought in Petrie and Justin Holl and then Patrick Kane to kind of surround their young guys with, some depth there. And it just hasn't seemed like it's moved the needle enough. But it comes down to goaltending. Like their goaltending is not at a level that they need to be at if they want to be one of those teams like we talked about with Ottawa, we talked about with Buffalo at the start of the year, as potentially taking a step to try to get into that playoff, wild card spot in that division. That's, still Toronto, Boston, and the Florida teams to take here.
I had anyone else that I wanted to get to, and it was based on today's morning skate, which you can read about over at CanucksArmy.com. Carson Susi hit the ice today. He's not going to be in the lineup tonight. People are asking in the chat, but a nice time for the Canucks to have a nice little break in the schedule, because Carson Susi hits the ice today. The next one is going to be January 2nd. That's when we wonder if he'll play, but he'll have some time to get on the ice since then. He spoke after the morning skate. I had the write-up over at CanucksArmy.com. So if you want to read the full quotes from Susi, go read it. Talked about the injury, talked about how he knew he was hurt as soon as that shot went off the back of his leg. Going to be interesting to see how the Canucks line up when he gets back, because you're going to have 4 left-handed defensemen in your lineup. And how are you going to take out Noah Juulsen when the way he's playing right now? And Harman, I almost forgot. I remember this now. I think on the 23rd, that last game with San Jose, Tocchet did it. He said Noah Juulsen has been one of our best defensemen. He threw it out there. Yep, we were waiting for it, and he threw it out there. He said Noah Juulsen has been one of our best defensemen. Not better, best. One of our best defensemen. But then I think he added, like, afterwards, from a defensive standpoint or from keeping it simple, he added a caveat there. But I thought it was interesting that came out of his mouth, was that Noah Juulsen has been one of our best defensemen. And of course, anytime that's said about one of these defensemen, we have to say it on the show. So there it is. Noah Juulsen, one of their best defensemen. But Harman, how do you think they'll line up once Carson Susi gets back?
I almost just want to wait to cross that bridge when we actually get there, just because knowing this team's luck, somebody else on the blue line is going to go down by the time Susi's healthy. So yeah, but with that said, I mean, the main question is just, can one of the lefties play on the right side? Because I think the simple answer, probably based off credentials, history, track record, would be Noah Juulsen coming out. And then maybe you have Ian Cole moving to the right side. And, perhaps Susi Cole is one of the pairs you lean on, since it seems like Hughes, Hronek, and Zadorov and Myers have been playing, have been tied to the hip together essentially as 2 pairs. So that's my initial thought.
That was going to be my question, is which left shot do you think slides over? But you answered it there. So it's good, though, that they have those options that Tocchet has. And I know he's kind of been reluctant to play left shots on the right side. We saw earlier on in the season there. But once this lineup is fully healthy on the back end, knock on wood that they don't get another injury, that's a pretty mean, tall, rangy, physical shutdown decor that, you have a lot of guys who might be traditional 5-6s, but if they can all kind of chip away and just be 5-10% better than what they might be pegged for as, you're kind of start to get the sum of all parts working your way up, where you can support that Hughes Hronek top pair. And those guys may be traditional bottom pairing defensemen, but if you kind of cycle them all through and let them play within their limits, I think that's a pretty, shrewd way to go about it.
And we'll see what ends up happening. And like Harman said, it's going to happen eventually, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Okay, folks, we're going to have one more show tomorrow. Then we will be back on January 2nd. But before that, we got to get to our Betway Bet of the day. And of course, there's going to be a game tonight, so we're going to have one to talk about tomorrow. But really interesting stuff from Carson Susi this morning at Morning Skate. All right, Grady, pull it up. The Betway Bet of the day, brought to you by our friends over at Betway. Look, he's had some time off. He's going to be well rested. Quinn Hughes is going to score his 11th goal of the season tonight. He also scored his 10th against San Jose in that final game. It was an empty netter. He's going to score his 11th tonight. That's what I'm saying. A $10 bet at plus 300 odds will return you $40 over at Betway. It must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. One step closer to taking down Faber in our little bet there, and me getting my steak dinner at his boss's place with a couple rum and cokes as well.
I love seeing your tweets whenever Hugh scores. You just tweet at him. You just got the countdown going.
And not only do I tweet at him, but when I'm in the press box, I lean down and look at him, and he's always looking right
nod.
back at me. Like, we're not even watching the celebration, not watching anything to do with the game, not our laptops. We like lean down and look at each other because we
You
don't
like
sit
send a
close to each
tweet
other.
and then you just lean down just to give him that other,
Yeah.
extra little shot.
Oftentimes I'll look before I even tweet. Like, as soon as the puck goes in, my head just shoots
Oh,
out
yeah.
and looks at him because I have to lean to go see him. And yeah, he's always leaning and looking back at me. And usually he's mouthing a couple words that I can read his lips on. But yeah, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good when Hughes hits 20 in this show. We're gonna have a big celebration. I think people are asking like when's Faber gonna do a hit. Faber and I have talked about that, and I think it might have to be as soon as Hughes hits 20 goals. Faber will come to a hit on the show, but we'll see. I don't want to speak for him. We'll see when and if that day comes. But for now, we will wrap it up there. For my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Grady Sass, my name is David Gugelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.